Here's another question that we received a lot of, and it's based off the future being so different with things like open contact coming in 5 years. How should we raise
Within
in
5.
within 5 years? Yeah, yeah. That's
Could be could be 2 years. Could be
already
3.
happened. I think I've been contacted, but anyway, my question is, how do we raise our children with the fact that in 20 years there could be extraterrestrials? Should we be doing alien classes? I mean, I'd be walking around like.
My experience is that they're already way ahead of most adults. I actually walked in, this was, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago. I walked into a clothing store and they had a couple of t-shirts that had, pictures of gray aliens on it and stuff like that. And there were these 3 15-year-olds in the store. And just out of curiosity, I pointed to that shirt and said, what do you think about that? They knew everything. I mean, everything already. So I think it's more a matter of the older adults having to learn from the children. Because think about this, ever since the moon landing in 1969, and yes, we did land on the moon, conspiracy theories aside, we have always since that time been in space. So any child born after that time, it's natural for them to think of people being in space. So the idea of other beings coming from space is not a foreign concept to them. Look at all the sci-fi programs, look at Star Trek, look at Star Wars, look at all of these different things that have been flooding into our entertainment for decades now that talk about the idea of, yeah, sure, we can meet extraterrestrials, So it's not that foreign of a concept to a lot of the children that exist on this planet. Plus, as Bashar has said, a lot of the children now that have been being born in the last couple of decades are not just a new generation. They are almost literally a new species. Genetic alterations have happened to make them, as they choose their birth path, as they choose their life path, they choose certain genetic alterations or configurations that make them more open to the idea of telepathic contact, psychic functioning, understanding that there are, other ETs and things like that. So I really don't think it's going to be that much of a shock to children when the ETs are introduced to society. It'll probably be a little bit more of a challenge for the older adults who are not used to that kind of idea. But that being said, raising children more along the lines of the formula is what will also help them, not specifically necessarily saying, okay, it's all about aliens, but the idea of, can you be a fully functioning human being on as many levels as possible so you can make yourself vibrationally more compatible should there be contact coming up between us and other societies from other civilizations. So it's really more about preparing them to be a full human being rather than just, not denying that there could be alien contact, but not necessarily stressing that as the most important thing. Because the most important thing is for us to be fully who we are as human beings as well, which would make us more vibrationally compatible with ETs who are also fully being themselves.
So I'm imagining extraterrestrial coming down, dad's freaking out, and the little kid's just like, hey, what's up, man?
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry, Dad. It's, it's fine.
Don't worry, I got this. Yeah.
They're friendly. And we've been talking in our dreams for the last, 10 years.
Yeah, he's my friend. Come on in, bud. Yeah, so the other question I had was just take the ETs out of the picture, and just to raise our kids in general, would the advice you have be just to be teaching them the formula?
In general, that's one of the things. In other words, as Bashar has sort of said, there are a few major steps. Number one is, of course, the parents and the teachers need to be creative and imaginative enough to create scenarios, simulations, play act, create things that allow children to learn the consequences of the choices they make in a safe way before they express those choices out in real life and then get actual real consequences. Let them learn that there are connections to things, that every choice they make actually does result in some particular outcome that connects them to it and connects other people to it, so that they understand how to make choices that are beneficial for everyone, including themselves, rather than just randomly making choices based on the idea of ego wants and stuff like that. So that there are consequences to choices is important to teach them in a safe environment that can be created as a simulation, and take them through exercises like, if you do this, what do you imagine would happen? If you do this, how do you imagine so-and-so would be affected? Give them the exercises to let them learn how to project consequences from choices. So the teachers and parents have to be imaginative and creative enough to create those simulated scenarios to help children understand those connections. Another thing that Bashar has talked about is teaching them, of course, that they are as powerful as they need to be to attract whatever they need in life, without having to hurt themselves or anyone else in order to get it. Now, notice I said what they need, not necessarily always what they want, because wants can be the product of an ego. What they need will fulfill them and will feel like a want, because it will actually be fulfilling. So the idea, again, is teach them how powerful they already are, not feeling disconnected, not feeling unworthy, not feeling undeserving, so that they know they're part of a whole. Teach them how to look at the thing holistically as a whole system, so they understand humanity and the earth and the cosmos as one system, so that in learning to be of service to others, they understand they're serving the whole, therefore they get served. Whereas opposed to being service to self can actually make them feel cut off from the whole, which then can't really serve them. So teaching them holistic systems, holistic perspectives is also very important. And then, yes, teaching them the formula, because that really does contain every step they need and activates all of the side effects, so to speak, like synchronicity and path of least resistance and so on and so forth, that will allow them to experience a flow in their life of creativity and self-empowerment. So those kinds of things are very important in raising a child to become a mature adult being.
Great.
We talked a little bit about following your highest excitement, and this question got so many comments and talk around it. And I think this is really a genuine, deep question for people. How can mundane things like household chores, dishes, laundry, etc., become my highest passion?
Everyday things can contain a degree of excitement. Now, when Bashar says act on your excitement, he doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a giant project or a career. He says, look around at all the things that you have available to you on an everyday basis. Just pick the one that has even just a little bit more attractiveness or excitement or curiosity connected to it. Do that one first. But also it takes, again, going back to the idea of a little bit of creativity and a little bit of imagination, because very often the things that people say aren't very exciting to them don't seem exciting because they have defined them that way. They have been trained to say, well, that's just this boring, mundane task, and you have to do it because X, Y, and Z. So it's about you coming up in your creative mind with ways to really allow that to be more of an experience you can get more out of. So, for example, I actually love to wash dishes by hand, because your hands under the warm water, you can drift off, you can meditate while you're doing it. It becomes a different kind of exercise with the application of not only dish soap, but a little imagination and a little creativity. So you get into the tactile sensation of the warm water running over your hands. It puts you into a more meditative state while you're doing it. And you can actually come away from washing dishes feeling like you just went through a mini meditation. So it's about how you approach these everyday things that need to be done in physical reality and give them a different definition and approach them in a way that's more creative, so that you can understand how any little thing can actually have some degree of attractiveness and curiosity and excitement in them, and make the idea of being physical something in general that is more enjoyable.
That is great. We had a lot of people ask about nervous system healing. So is there a way to heal our nervous system, or are some people brought into this life with nervous systems that are actually beyond repair?
Well, again, you have to understand that many choices are made in spirit as to what kind of a life path to have. And sometimes people will choose to experience physiological conditions for very important reasons, not only for their own soul's growth in dealing with that challenge, but you have to understand we're all connected, and all our life paths are connected and interconnected. And someone with a condition that seems to span their entire life could have been something that was chosen to allow scientists, researchers, doctors, what have you, to figure out a way to cure that condition by dealing with that person and allowing that person to give them feedback for the things that they may come up with that says, let's try this and let's try that, so that eventually humanity doesn't necessarily have to experience that condition anymore. So you have to look at it as the reason why that was chosen by the spirit. It's usually from a very advanced spirit who's willing to experience that because they know it's temporary, and they know how much it could actually benefit humanity at large by giving people an opportunity to interact with someone with that condition, to perhaps even find a way to make sure those conditions don't ever exist in the future. For example, there's a lot of things going on now with gene technology, gene editing, and so on and so forth. It's referred to usually as CRISPR technology. And from what I understand, it's possible that within the next decade or so, that's going to be a major focus of any kind of medical approach, where a lot of things can actually be altered because of gene manipulation. So the fact that people have these conditions and diseases has allowed scientists to explore what's going on in the genetic structure that creates this, and how can we turn that off? How can we edit that out? So it's been of great benefit in advancing the whole idea of medical science and genetic technology for people who have these conditions, to work with researchers, scientists, and doctors to figure out how that can be changed in the future. So you have to look at it as on a case-by-case basis as to what is happening that wouldn't be happening if this person didn't have that condition.
Wow.
What are we learning from this? How are we advancing from this? And thanking them for being willing to experience that so the rest of us could learn.
We have a bunch of questions about kind of just like the process of a soul's journey. Can we pay off karma in this life to avoid reincarnation? If so, how?
First of all, the spirit always has free will. There's no forced reincarnation. Karma is not what people think it is. Karma is simply the recognition that one may be out of balance, and the willingness to take the actions necessary to bring one back into balance. That's all it is. The original Sanskrit word, karma, just means action. It has nothing to do with the idea of judgment. It has nothing to do with the idea of some kind of debt being passed along from life to life. It is an immediate present situation where you recognize that you may be out of alignment with yourself, out of balance with yourself, and the willingness to take the actions to bring yourself back into balance. That's what erases the idea of karma, period. And you always have free will as a spirit. You are never forced to reincarnate. If you decide that that's the best thing for you, in terms of the lessons you want to learn, based on discussions you have with your soul family, your spirit guides, your councils, your angelic teams when you're in spirit, then you will make the choice to incarnate because you think that's the best way you can learn the lessons you wish to learn. That's the best way your soul can grow. But it's never forced, ever. You always have free will to choose, physically and also spiritually. So that's an outdated, old-fashioned idea. It doesn't really exist in the way most people think.
A few different people asked about fungi. because fungi allow you to access spirits. So the question is, are fungi actually multi-dimensional beings? And what role in connecting to the higher mind?
In a sense, Bashar refers to certain things that grow upon the earth that create altered states as the teachers of the earth. So they are extensions of nature given to us to allow us to experience alternate states of reality so that we can understand and learn and grow from the physical level that we are connected to many, many different levels, many different dimensions, many different beings. So it's a key, it's a way of accessing those altered states that allow us to experience that connection that we all have while we're physical beings, so that we can remember we do have those connections and not forget that we have them. So the earth provides some of that for us. Now, of course, the thing to understand is, again, these are teachers. So they teach you how to get into that state, ultimately knowing that you can create that state without the teacher. In the same way that when you're in school, you learn certain things at a certain age, in a certain grade from a teacher, and then you graduate. And you can do those things on your own because now you go to the next class, the next level, the next grade. You no longer need the teacher you had before because you've learned those lessons. So the idea is to use them, use the teachers of the earth in a respectful way, in a balanced way, understand how to get into that state yourself and no longer need the teacher ultimately, and not allow the teacher to become a crutch, because then it becomes, whether physically or whether mentally, it becomes an addiction, it becomes a crutch, and you're missing the point of what the teacher is attempting to teach you, how to get into these altered states on your own. So ultimately, it's learning that lesson. And the trick to understanding that, as Bashar has sort of suggested, is the principle is you cannot experience what you're not the vibration of first. So when you even remember what it was like to be in one of those altered states using the teacher, even though it feels different because now you're a different person, even the ability to remember having been in that state means you have to be in that state to have the memory of having been in that state, because you cannot perceive what you are not the frequency of. So you have to actually be in that state to have the memory of having been in that state. That's the trick. Even though it feels different, because many people try to recapture exactly how it felt before. That's not the point. You're a different person now. It's going to feel different, but you have to know that even being able to recall how it felt means you're in the state. And once you're in that state, take actions from that state. That's the state you want to take actions from. That's the state of your true vibration, your higher frequency. So take actions in life, do things in life, follow your excitement by being in that state. That's what it's training you to do. Come from that state in the things that you do.
Yes.
What is the difference between the soul and the oversoul? And how do parallel versions of ourselves exist?
Well, the soul is an individuated consciousness. The oversoul, for lack of a better way of explaining it, is that level of our greater consciousness that experiences a multitude of soul parallel reality experiences simultaneously. So let's say, by very simplistic analogy, your soul is like watching a television screen. There's a program that's playing. You're following that individual program, that plot line, that story, and there is no other story. That's what the soul is experiencing as an individual reflection of all that is. The oversoul would be like having 200 television screens in front of your eyes and being able to watch them all simultaneously. Each one of those screens being an individual soul path that is connected to you as the greater being, and you can perceive all of those experiences all at once. That's the oversoul perspective. In a sense, you could say it's kind of like the mini God perspective, where you're experiencing a multitude of parallel realities that all exist simultaneously. So parallel realities is just the way things are structured in reality, because this gets a little bit complex. I'll try to break it down simply. Everything is one thing. Everything is an expression of one single thing. That includes the idea of time and space. So if everything is an expression of a more simple idea, what scientists are looking for in terms of the unified theory of everything, well, they have to simplify the idea of time and space as well. So the simplest version of space is a single dimensionless point. The simplest version of time is a single timeless now moment. So if really everything is the product of a single dimensionless place and a single timeless moment, then what we perceive as different moments, different places, are just the same moment, the same place from another point of view. That's what creates parallel realities. Everything is happening at once because it's all different expressions of the same moment and the same place, the here and the now. So that automatically, that holographic perspective of looking at the same moment from this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle, it's like being in a hall of mirrors. You're standing at the center and you see all the reflections, and every reflection happens to be conscious as well. Those are the parallel realities, having different angles, different experiences. It's all happening at the same time because that's the innate structure that happens in a hall of mirrors, all based on the fact that you're a single individual standing amongst all those reflections. So it all takes its cue from one basic thing, but it expresses itself in a multitude of ways because there can be an infinite number of perspectives of that one thing. And those different perspectives are what we typically refer to as parallel realities. I hope that explained it.
Yes. And I would like to ask, is there a way to tap into your oversoul in order to pick up some benefit from fellow souls on the TV screens?
Well, you're doing that automatically all the time. You don't necessarily always have to be conscious of it. And in fact, very often, it's better that you're not conscious of it. The idea is that it's a flow of information coming to you. You're cross-connecting all the time, connecting, plugging in, unplugging from, getting downloads, getting information. Every single day, every single moment, this is happening. You're shifting through parallel realities, gathering information that you need to the next step in your life, and the next step, and the next step, and the next step. It happens automatically. This is how we're connected. So being consciously aware that that's happening is one thing. Having to really stop and say, okay, now I want to be aware of where I'm getting this thought from and how I'm connecting to it, kind of slows down the whole process, because now you're not living your life and using the information to move forward. You're actually stopping the entire machine and going, okay, now who am I getting this from and what do I need to know about? You don't always need to know that because it stops the flow. So you're doing this automatically. Now, sometimes, for various reasons, there might be what we could call a moment of expanded lucidity that creates experiences like déjà vu, which can be the result of tapping into parallel realities in a variety of ways, or spirit level realities where you laid out your life and suddenly you're looking at the blueprint and realizing, oh, this feels familiar because I've already set this blueprint up. And now that I'm actually manifesting it physically, of course it feels like it happened before because I already created this blueprint in spirit. Or it feels like this happened before because I'm tapping into another parallel reality version of myself that's already lived this. And suddenly it feels like I've done this before, even though I haven't. I'm tapping into the version of myself in a parallel reality that has, because I have this expanded moment of lucidity, because I have broadened my bandwidth of senses that can pick up on what's going on in a different parallel reality momentarily for some reason. So we all have those moments of lucidity that expands our bandwidth, but it's not always necessary to absolutely maintain that, because it's about using those experiences to get on with our lives and move forward, not just sit there and figure out, okay, well, am I supposed to just keep paying attention to that other parallel reality? You'll get what you need. It's an automatic function, but you have to keep moving forward to be able to use that system properly in the way that it's meant to be used to help you live your life.